Welcome to a new episode of No Cold War Perspectives. I'm Biljana Vankovska, a member of the No Cold War Collective, but also a board member of the Transnational Foundation for Peace and Future Research. It is exactly where our today's guest comes from. He is co-founder and director of TFF, the Transnational Foundation. Jan Oberg is well-known peace researcher and activist and a practitioner, someone who has been nominated for Nobel Peace Prize many times, but of course, these prizes often end in wrong hands. But he's an old friend, someone who helped me understand the collapse of my own former homeland, and also traveled all around the world in worse places, in worse times, from Rwanda to Syria, Iraq, and many other places. But today, I have just one question for Jan. It is, what the heck is going on in Europe, in the West? So how can you, as someone who approaches problems as a doctor, giving diagnosis, prognosis, and therapy, talk today about moving or switching this peace project, allegedly peace project, into a peace spoiler and militarized society that represents the danger not only for its own citizens, but for the global community. Jan, welcome. Thank you for accepting this invitation, and now over to you.
Thank you so much, Biljana. It's a great joy to see you and to participate in this event. And I would like to hurry very quickly. I have 6 points. I hope I can manage them. And the first, I'd like to say a little bit about why I'm speaking differently from many other analytical persons because of coming from peace and conflict and future research, which is a science that aims, exactly as medicine does, to reduce something bad, namely violence, all kinds of violence. And what we do is, as you said, diagnosis, prognosis, and therapy or solutions, which is where most social science does not give you anything. They look at the past and the present, have nothing to say about the future. What we should do as peace researchers, and I would say everybody who wants change, is to spend at least 60% of the time and energy on discussing the future that does not exist yet, but could exist. So that's the first thing. It's about reducing violence because there's far too much of it. And it is simply to use the doctor's analogy. But it is very much a matter of turning to the future because we're all scientists, politicians, media, talking about the past and in the best of cases, the present. Point 2, I do not believe that we can understand international politics any longer by political science, international relations, doctrine studies, and all other kinds of, if you will, rational intellectual approaches. What we are in now is a falling apart of the value system of science, of fact-based rational knowledge and analysis and decision-making into emotionalism, psychological hiccups, eschatology, groupthink, hatred, and other rather nasty elements that seem to have entered politics as a natural thing. The hatred I've seen the last 3 years against the Russian people is unheard of, has never existed before the almost 50 years that I have tried to understand these things. And therefore, we need to train ourselves to understand the pathology of the West, which has to do with the fact that the West is declining and falling, and it doesn't know how to, handle that situation. But as all empires have done before it, this will fall, and there will be no new empire. The Chinese are not that stupid to try to make everybody else do and think with a missionary way of thinking of the Western Christian world as we have. They're not going to make others be Chinese. They are proud to be different. Point 3, we're in a double Cold War now in Europe. We're in a Cold War with Russia and China, but particularly Russia at the moment, manifest in the Russia-NATO conflict that arose because we cheated Russia with all the promises given to Gorbachev not to expand NATO if Germany could be united and be in NATO. So instead of keeping our promises, we expanded it, and we expanded it to one too many countries, namely Ukraine. Everybody who knew anything about security politics knew that that was an utterly stupid idea and an impossible idea. But people like Thorvald Stoltenberg and Biden, etc., sorry, not Thorvald Stoltenberg, Jens Stoltenberg, Biden and others thought that this was a great idea. Even though Biden himself had said that that was not a good idea way before. Kissinger was against it, Brzezinski was against it. Kennan was against it, Jan Oberg was against it, not to compare, but there were lots of intellectuals who said, don't do Ukraine. And NATO anyhow established its first office in Kiev 3 months after the independence of Ukraine. Everybody could see where this was going. And that is why we have a Cold War today. We have a warm war in Ukraine, as tragic as can be, because we have used Ukraine as a stepping stone, as a tool for fighting Russia. Instead of, if you want to fight Russia, pull out 300,000, 500,000 of your own NATO troops and do it in a decent way, we said we can arm Ukraine to do that dirty work for us. Now, that is what has fallen apart now. And of course, we have totally canceled Russia on all dimensions, meaning Russia is not going to turn back to be a friend of or an ally of or trying to be Western anymore. They have turned away from us in Europe. Secondly, there will be a new Cold War. Maybe I should just add to it that I wrote 3 years ago a 30-argument, 150-page article about why NATO should be abolished. It's an outdated organization. It's an illegal organization that in no way follows its own treaty. It is one that has done illegal things such as bombing Yugoslavia, etc., etc. You know all about that. And therefore, the deterrence idea, offensive deterrence, is a fail-safe way of creating warfare. That you cannot make peace, you cannot create stability by saying, I'm able to kill you 5,000 kilometers away if you don't do what I tell you to do, or if you do what I don't want you to do. Therefore, and I'll come back to that because my main task today is to talk about what we can do about these things. The therapy part, as I insist, is important, and the future part. So then there is a Cold War with the US, totally predictable, but it's only that intelligence services in Europe, including my own countries, Sweden and Denmark, are not so intelligent. It's very simple that somebody should have made up plans for the fact that there could be a Trump regime 2.0. The Danish government, for instance, totally surprised by the fact that he's bringing up what he already brought up 5 years ago, namely Greenland is a state property we needed. And they're behaving like school children, not able to even having foreseen that that demand would come up and how to react. It's disgusting in my view as a Danish citizen to see this. Whereas everybody has said Russia is a threat, the United States today is the largest threat against everybody else, including China and including Western Europe, because what they're going to do now is to, under the Trump regime, I don't call it a government or administration, I call it a regime because it's nothing to do with democracy anymore. It's run by executive orders and statement at press conferences, family and friends like Musk. It's a disgrace for what we call democracy, and I'm not sure the US ever was a democracy, but it certainly is not today. And that new Trump America will be an autarkic US, reaching principle from what he's already said, from Panama over the US to Canada, and then Greenland, where he will not exclude using military weapons. And then the 47 bases that have been set up by the earlier administration in the Nordic countries. And then, of course, Gaza, with the resources outside Gaza. It's all about resources. Ukraine is also about resources that the autarkic US will try to have when they have found out and predict, I think correctly, that the rest of the world will have nothing to do with them. So these kinds of things are extremely, extremely dangerous for the rest of the world, simply because law will no longer be important. You can do these things. They are so outrageous that the world is still not understanding what it is Donald Trump is doing. He's totally violating decency, empathy. He's adding to the genocide by creating his, 𝐵𝐵𝐺𝐴 project in Gaza, etc. And that comes on top of, lost wars, Ukraine, Nord Stream, and God knows what. We are morally totally in decay, and it will speed up and accelerate with the Trump administration regime, as I said. So in consequence of these two Cold Wars, and mind you also, he might leave NATO, and he might even play the game that if Europe does not do what he wants, he will cut the codes and spare parts and parts to, let's say, F-35 and everything else military, because the Europeans have done what you should never do if you want to be secure, namely put all your eggs in one basket. Don't do that. And that's what they've done with a total loyalty. No matter what the US did since 45, Europe was behind it and supported it. So what should be done? My final point. First of all, we need to isolate Israel and the US. It's not easy, but we have to begin to think of these things. Secondly, we need a declaration from NATO or whatever who can do it that Ukraine will never become a member of NATO. That will disarm the Russians and their argument, and will create an alternative security structure in Europe, which will make a fantastic country out of Ukraine, but not steal its resources. I am thinking of things like, having a Switzerland-like structure in Ukraine, but that's too long to go into here. We all need, and Ukraine's people, not the leadership, but the people deserve a very good treatment from East and West after what we've done to them. We need to create peace first and then security, because security politics with weapons will never lead to peace. It's very simple. NATO will have to go. And what we need instead is a new way of thinking that is defensive, defensive deterrence, short-range weapons, self-defense, no ability to kill others are far away, intervention only by the United Nations, a reformed, new type of United Nations, because the United Nations and its charter is still the most intelligent document that governments ever signed. And third, we need transarmament. That is a switch away from the present military, industrial, media, academic run militarism. Militarism is something we must simply stop. And you can talk about peace education, you can talk about all kinds of things, going to school in each other's countries, sending American school children to China, Chinese school children to Europe, etc., etc. We need to understand each other better. Finally, let me just say, peace will come back the day the Western Empire has retreated. And I always end my small introductions by quoting George Bernard Shaw. Most people look at the world as it is and ask why. What we should do is to look at the world as it could be and ask why not. So begin the brainstorms now of the better world that comes after the US has left its dominant position. That is going to happen, I assure you. And peace will be the most relevant thing in the future for humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan.